If it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men. That's the passage we're looking at today for our chapel session. As we look at that passage, first of all, I want to point out that there is an implication that it's not always possible to live with all men. Now, it's not always possible because, first of all, there's a natural conflict that exists between light and darkness. In John chapter 3, verse number 19, Jesus would say, men love darkness rather than light. And in verse number 20, he would say, for everyone practicing evil hates the light. And so we need to recognize that as a reality. Also, we need to acknowledge that men hated Jesus and they're going to hate us. They called him Beelzebub. What do you think that they'll call his disciples? Matthew 10, verse number 25. And then we need to realize that it's not always possible because we've been given a mandate to contend earnestly for the faith. Jude, verse 3. And we have the example of the Apostle Paul in Galatians chapter 2 and verse 5 when he recounts how he dealt with the Judaizing teachers. He said, we did not yield submission even for an hour. And so it is the fact that there are times when it is not possible to live at peace. Brother Franklin Camp made a statement, and I don't have the exact quote, but I called a friend this morning to ask him, and he said that I was pretty close in my paraphrase. My brother Camp said something like this. He said, I hope that I'm never afraid to fight for what is right, but I hope I never fall in love with fighting. And that needs to be our attitude. We need to, as much as is possible, we need to live at peace with all men. To think about that, I want to back up to verse number 1 of Romans chapter 12, where Paul talks about rational living. He says, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable logikos, rational service. Now I know that word is used over in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 2, the pure milk of the word, the logical word. And we need to realize that there are things that are logical. And what Paul is saying here in Romans chapter 12, verse 18, is rational. It's logical. Conventional wisdom says, no, it's not rational. It's not logical. But it is. Romans chapter 12, verse number 2 tells us, don't you follow the paradigm of this world. Don't you let the world squeeze you into its own mode. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Well, what does conventional wisdom say? Listen to a very sad, sad little man by the name of Friedrich Nietzsche. I wish I could go back in time sometime to talk to him and try to help him realize the truth. But he has many disciples today. He said, assert yourself, care for nothing but yourself. The only vice is weakness, and the only virtue is strength. Be strong, be a Superman, get the world if you can. Listen to Jesus. He said, if anyone desires to come after me, let him first deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. Very different, isn't it? Listen to some of the things that Jesus says beginning in Matthew chapter 5, verse number 38. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I tell you, do not resist an evil person, but whoever slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. Verse number 40, if anyone wants to sue you and take away your tunic, let him have your cloak also. And whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to him who asks you, from him who wants to borrow, and from you do not turn away. Now listen closely. Verse number 43. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies. Bless those who curse you. Do good to those who hate you. And pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you. Now, as we think about this, we need to understand verse number 19 of Romans 12 says that we need to leave room, leave place for the vengeance of the Lord. But as much as possible, we need to live at peace with all men. That requires intentionality on our part. That requires a commitment on our part to subscribe to adhere, and follow the values of Jesus. So our challenge in trying to live at peace with all men as much as is possible, our challenge is to be faithful disciples of Jesus. That means to live like Jesus, to act like Jesus, and to react like Jesus. God bless you.